Okay, we are live. So, hello to everyone out there. Welcome to our interview here. I have with me today Dr. Donald Wallenfang. So excited to have you, Dr. Wallenfang. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Avery. Great to be with you again.
Yes, yeah. Actually, Dr. Wallenfang and I did had a little chat, I guess, back in December, start of December. So almost 2 months ago now.
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, I want to say hello to everyone who might be watching this either live or later on YouTube and on Facebook, either through the U Project Facebook page or through my own personal Facebook profile. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for taking some time to check this out. Have a great conversation lined up. I'm really excited to have Dr. Wallenfang today. I think we're going to cover some really I'll use the word exciting topics, even though we're going to be talking about boredom. But I think it'll be a very fruitful conversation. I hope that all of you are able to receive something from it. So that's the goal here. We're going to give it just a few minutes. It's 5 o'clock now. We'll give it just a few minutes, just in case any people we'll see the stream and hopefully be able to come and join and have a good chat, and probably close anywhere between 4:45, 6 o'clock. We'll see what happens. But yes, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Wallenfang, you're in Michigan and you live on an island. And I know that the ferry was shut down because there's no road access. You have to take the ferry onto the island. I know the ferry got shut down the other day because of the ice.
Right.
Is it still it's still closed there?
It is still closed.
Oh no!
Crazy. Yeah. Here's a little view on my back.
Oh wow!
Back windows. Really pretty woods, and see deer out there all the time. Saw them earlier today. So, it's kind of a nice place to be stranded, but it's not fun to be stranded. And this is the first time this has happened since we moved here about a year and a half ago, when there's just so much ice build up, and then the sun kind of melts the ice and it forms a layer across the St. Clair River where the ferry goes across. So sometimes they can cut a path through there that goes back and forth, but right now it's really tough going. And apparently it's just about an annual thing. We're learning as we go to have about a week's worth of groceries stocked.
Oh wow!
And yeah, it's a little unnerving, but trusting in God through it, and getting to know some of the people around here. It's just kind of a commonplace occurrence. So my wife went to the local store, which is ironically called in French sans souci, without worry. No worry. And she went to get some pasta and milk, and a guy behind her was getting some beer. So he didn't seem too concerned.
And this is the store on the island, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Little store.
Okay. Also, just want to say hello to saw a couple people pop on to our viewing stream. So hello to everyone again. We're just making some small talk here as we kind of give it a few minutes to kind of get things going. Hopefully people will join on. But anyway, I'm glad that you I'm glad that you at least have some supplies on the island, and you won't be, horribly stranded, and you and your kids without, your family without food for a couple days.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Even there's a little fire department on this island, and they have these like hovercraft boats that'll go get like emergency kind of supplies. So if you do happen to run out of food, you can let them know, and either you get to ride across, or they at least bring stuff back to you. But yeah, it's kind of like a survival show or something on TV.
Okay.
So we're pretending all is well, at least, and
right.
Not panicking prematurely.
Okay. Yeah, don't panic. Well, hopefully it'll warm up and to get going. So anyway, we're getting close to that 5-minute mark here. So I guess we can dive into our actual interview, our actual conversation this evening. And again, hello to everyone watching on YouTube and on Facebook. We're so glad to have you. So I have with me Dr. Donald Wallenfang. He is a professor of theology and philosophy at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. So thank you so much again, Dr. Wallenfang, for being part of this. Do you want to just give a little brief introduction to yourself, maybe a little bit of your background, some of the things that you've studied in your professional career, and we'll get around to, kind of tie that into our topic of discussion today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for asking. It's always an interesting question, not knowing exactly where to begin telling about your background and things. But because it's such a fascinating question, I think for each one of us, when we're asked, who are you? Where do you come from? What's your story? I ended up trying to put it into writing, and it'll be published later this year under the title I, God. So it's kind of a spin-off of like iPad, iPod,
Right.
iMac, whatever. And it's about my own conversion story to Christ and everything. So that book will be out later in the year, and it's got a bunch of pictures, my upbringing, when I used to play football, and the trumpet. And so I've got a history that's built up so far. It was in youth ministry in the Catholic Church for 9 years, and then transitioned to academia. Got a PhD from Loyola University in Chicago, the largest Jesuit university in the United States, and specialized in like philosophical theology. So a lot of deep thinking, a lot of heavy lifting intellectually all the time. But now I teach at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, where I get to enjoy having a lot of students from Canada and all over the United States through the seminary. So like yourself. So it's, and I'm married. I've got 6 children, ages 19 down to 6, 5 boys, 1 girl. Girl's the oldest. And we have a lot of fun at our house. My boys, we broke down and got a PlayStation 5. For Christmas because their grandma gave them some money, and so they like to play Fortnite. And basketball, the 2K, and the football, FIFA soccer. Fall Guys is kind of interesting game. So they're doing some of that as I speak. Once they get their work done at home, then they can use that.
Right. Okay, yeah, and I know they play basketball as well as a sport. So, you mentioned your own sporting background. That's great. I think maybe one of the ways that we can kind of launch into this this topic of our discussion, which is really this idea of wonder and the counterpart of wonder, which maybe you agree it's not. Maybe it's the counterpart. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's a better antithesis of wonder, but this experience of boredom and this idea that there's something more behind these. And I guess I want to get at that by way of the specific philosophical discipline that you really focused in on during your academic studies, which is this area of phenomenology. So I just threw out a lot of big words. Dr. Wallenfang is going to break that all down. It's not as complicated as it sounds. So if you could just maybe for our viewers, just kind of give a very kind of layman's description of phenomenology and why it might be categorized as, the philosophy of wonder, the science of wonder, and also a bit of how you got into this area of philosophy.
Oh, for sure. This is one of my favorite questions. What is phenomenology? So much so, I have another book on here, which I know inspired our conversation. Not that I'm trying to sell books. If anyone has this suspicion, if I get $1 per copy, so it's not like, writing books, I'm going to get rich. It's just, if questions come up, that's why you write books, because you can give a more spread out, thorough description of something. So in these, seconds, I'll try to give a definition, but that's what this little book tries to unpack, like the steps of the method and everything else. But if I just sum it up in a quick definition, phenomenology is the science of meaning and meaningfulness. It's a foundational science that really is the the grounds for all empirical sciences, all the natural sciences, social behavioral sciences. The fact that we can meet with data that are objective in nature and not just subject to kind of relativistic interpretation, but that there are givens within human experience that are universals. And what the givens we care about most in our experience are meanings that lead to meaningfulness. What do we find most meaningful in life? So phenomenology is a kind of step-by-step method to open oneself to all that gives itself within experience and to describe it.
Okay. So it might sound a little bit abstract to some of our viewers, but I read through your book. I really enjoyed it. And I think the way that I kind of received it and have kind of internalized it is this sense of exactly what we're talking about, which is wonder and this experience that so many of us have as we grow older, that things start to lose their shine. They start to lose their, the glimmer, the novelty perhaps. And especially if we've been in the same, physical space, the same work environment, we've been in the same relationships. We kind of, some of us, at different times, we get this sense of, things stagnating. And what I think is so beautiful about phenomenology is you look at things that are very ordinary and you draw from them this richness of meaning that is rather extraordinary. And that's where it's not so much about trying to seek all these new experiences as it is about encountering whatever is in your day-to-day life and being able to see those with renewed eyes. Would that be a fair kind of description?
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I guess to allude to or jump back to what I was alluding to earlier, why do you think it is that perhaps as children, or you have children yourself, why does this come so easily to children? Perhaps I think children seem to be better phenomenologists than the majority of us, than most adults. What is it about that childlike innocence and that childlike disposition that opens up the doors of meaning and wonder in a way that even our more intellectually developed adult minds struggle to?
Yes, indeed. The child has been described as the natural phenomenologist, and I've said the child is phenomenologist par excellence. He or she is a contemplative, indigenously to their childhood, I would say, because, as you were saying, as we grow older, things can get repetitive or kind of monotonous, or at least we're interpreting them this way. And sometimes we're interpreting things this way as a form of security for ourselves. We know what to predict. Like right now, I'm stranded on an island, and right by Canada, by the way. It's Wallenfang Island is right across the river. I'm literally stranded on an island. And I'm smiling, I'm relaxed, we can have a conversation. and it's okay. But I could tell you earlier today, I was kind of getting a little worked up and talking with my wife, what about our food supply and how long could this go on? And, I can't get into work Monday and our kids can't get to their basketball game and all this stuff. But then I just had to look over at my children being themselves to help me, the adult, just relax, even enjoy this day, and let it be a gift. And that's one of the key terms for phenomenology itself is gift. It's an interpretation of everything through what John Paul II called the hermeneutics of gift, a way of interpreting all that happens within experience as giving itself to you, because that is the very shape of experience. And this is what children, they're so good at receiving all the goodness within experience and delighting in it.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer. I remember, it just reminds me a little anecdote of, I had a friend who had a a newborn nephew, and she was describing just his joy and excitement and everything. And so one day she was talking about him and said, he's fascinated by corners, the fact that you have a wall here and you have a wall here and they converge and there's a point, and it's just like, whoa, what is this? And of course, anyone who's been in a room has seen a corner. But when you're an infant, I mean, it's all new, right? It's just the first time you're seeing much of anything, right? So, yeah, I have to agree that there's something really beautiful about that. I guess one, not objection, but one issue I could see someone raising with what you've described is that it sounds all good that, we have this hermeneutic of gift, that everything in our experience is given to us. But what about when we don't like what that experience is giving to us, right? How do we how do we understand phenomenology in the light of human suffering, for instance? And boredom is another category, but there's also, and maybe that's a more neutral category, but there's also this idea of suffering, right? That all of us experience in different forms. And certainly in those moments, and I can, attest from personal experience, it's like, I don't like this situation. I don't like, maybe it's a person, maybe it's an illness, maybe it's just a difficult circumstances, presented itself to me. I'm tired, whatever it may be. I don't like this. I don't want to be present to this. I want to get away from it. I want to fight against this. How do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, for sure. This is something that's very helpful about phenomenology, is that it allows us to describe any and all experiences while suspending judgment about them, whether they're positive, negative, good, or bad. It's also it's a double-edged sword, because we need another method to come to the rescue when judging something to be good or bad, and that is metaphysics, which is a whole other method. And
I just wrote a book on that one too.
Another book on metaphysics, which also cultivates wonder through its own methodology. But these two methods, I think, really go together in sound philosophy. Phenomenology is like the sail, and metaphysics is like the anchor of the boat of thought. But coming back to your question, I would say that when we have what we might ultimately judge to be a negative experience, maybe of the worst kind, something like an abusive experience, it's not so much what's being given, it's what is lacking that should be there. So in the case of someone being mean, what is lacking? What is not giving itself? Love. And this is how the Christian tradition defines evil itself. It's not some force opposed to the good. It's a lack of goodness, a deprivation of goodness. And phenomenology is trying to take stock of all that is possible within human experience. And the heights of possibility, it has to do with love. Has to do, once again, with a gift. When there's a negative experience, there's not a real gift happening, but stealing away of the gift in one form or another. So phenomenology can help to describe an experience and show the various degrees of givenness, or what gives, or also show what's lacking within the experience and what should be there, what could be there. And then ultimately we would need metaphysics to, again, make a judgment and say, in a more deductive way, what is good, what are the first principles, and from there. But phenomenology, at least more inductively, is saying, just describing things, and then we can compare different experiences and see which ones seem to be more authentic to being human, and which ones are less authentic, which ones promote and multiply possibility, and which ones seem to subtract from it in human life. And in this way, phenomenology, even in itself, when done well, can help open us to those fields of goodness that we all long to live in.
Right. Wow, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like what you said there about, like it's a lack of, it's an experience, but there's something lacking in that experience, right? If you have a negative interaction with someone, you said what's lacking is that love, right? whether on your end or theirs or both. And I guess when you're speaking about, for instance, physical illness, what's lacking there is the fullness of health, right? That we are supposed to have. But of course, in our fallen world, we often don't have, for various reasons. But I guess to shift a little bit to another one of the, I guess, a related issue. And again, I don't want to make this too heady for people, because I think it's good that we look at these things in a way that everyone's able to understand and appreciate, and everyone's able to kind of partake of the banquet, as it were, of this discourse. But when it comes to the experience of boredom, I think that's something really unique, because there, in a lot of circles in our culture, I think there are people that are very bored with their lives. And what is sometimes very frustrating for them is that the objective circumstances of their life are often very positive, right? Certainly when compared to someone living in poverty, someone who's destitute, someone who is, perhaps bedridden. You have people that are living in, first world countries that are, relatively secure, family, job, whatever, and various challenges may arise. But I think a lot of us struggle with this issue of just boredom, that the things of life that we're experiencing, there's something, we feel that there's something missing. And so I personally believe maybe that's why people seek more, right? That seems to be our cultural solution, is that I'm bored. Well, I need more, right? Whether that's more entertainment or more food, more pleasure, more company, more stuff, whatever it may be. But I was wondering, how that might relate to what we've been talking about. What's the connection, do you think, between this idea of givenness and this experience of boredom that many of us tend to live with on some level?
Yeah, for sure. Well, firstly, I'm interested in is to turn the question back to you and ask, have you been bored lately at all? And if so, what's going on when you make a quick analysis of that for yourself? Why do you feel bored?
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I think yes would be the honest answer. I'm sure at some point for the past little while. As for what's going on in that given moment, perhaps you could say it's a lack of joy, or a sense of wanting to be doing something more engaging or exciting. I'm reading this book, but I'd rather be hanging out with, friends and family, or, I'm sitting here in my room working on something, and I'd rather be, watching a movie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have to admit I've had similar experiences, and there's this one phenomenologist named Emmanuel Levinas, and he describes the experience of boredom in a phenomenological way, saying that each of us has existence, and we can sense the weight of being on ourselves. And in French is saying il y a, 3 little words, I-L-Y-A, il y a, the il y a, you say there is, il y a in French. And the there is in our experience can be a kind of haunting, menacing thing, like the white noise of being, the sense of being riveted to being, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the existentialists, Jean-Paul Sartre, and people similar to him, Karl Jaspers, get into a kind of philosophy of existence, a kind of sense of life as a room with no exits. And then you might resign to despair or be bored and not feeling like you can escape. And like you say, you want to do something that stimulates, or, we might describe it in the French, jouissance, something that you enjoy, and it lifts you out of that malaise of static being. And so all of us are looking for this more ecstatic way to be, so that we don't feel like we're just a kind of suffocating in this static malaise of being. And so our first movement out of boredom is, like you said, something enjoyable, a movie, something to drink, something to eat, a conversation, go exercise, enjoy nature, all kinds of enjoyments. And in the Bible and scripture, we have this book right in the middle called Ecclesiastes. And the author is asking similar questions and coming back to this refrain that vanity, vanity, all is vanity and chasing after the wind. I try to enjoy all this and that and do this or that, but also it comes back to the sense of vanity, kind of like, what's the use? What's the point? And it's a very great book to read, I think, on this question. It helps us raise a lot more questions, and it kind of guides us to a solution. Back to Levinas, who himself is Jewish philosopher, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century. One of my favorite guys to read his work. He says, enjoyment is a start, but pleasure never keeps its promise of ultimate liberation from boredom. We keep chasing one pleasure after the next, but we then recoil back onto that place of boredom. And he says the final exodus of the self from boredom of life, boredom of the self, is to live in responsibility for the other, to live in responsibility for the other person who faces me. This always is exciting, interesting, involves suffering. But part, perhaps, of our struggle with boredom is our fear of suffering in so many ways. And we try to live this self-care to such degree that it gets boring, as if the point of life is just to care about me myself, and I, and to protect myself from all threats of the world. But we've got it pretty cushy compared to lots of previous generations.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways. A lot of material goods and comforts and stuff. Even stranded on islands, like, oh well, we'll work through this. We'll get the provisions and stuff. But if you think back in the day, human experience, it's scrappy, and every day is an adventure. So I think part of the solution, along with Levinas, to live in responsibility for their, like as a dad, when I start to feel bored at home, and I get to be at home a lot, it's really a great gift. But I think about how else does my wife need me? My children need me. Instead of like just kind of looking in the mirror of boredom, I go outside myself and I say, okay, I'm going to give myself over. And maybe I'm less comfortable. Maybe I'm standing and talking rather than laying on the bed. Maybe I'm getting down and playing with Legos, or go like this morning. My 6-year-old son Oliver, he asked, Dad, want to go play basketball with me? And it was like early this morning. We have a barn with a hoop in it, and
nice.
and I said, sure. But it wasn't like, yes, let's go. It was like, oh, serious? Right.
Yeah.
We played basketball till like midnight last night, and now the first thing I want to do is play basketball. But I liked in playing basketball with my son, and I am not bored. Because what happens to the self? You lose yourself. You lose yourself in the game. You lose yourself in the relationship with the other person, especially the vulnerable other, the child other. And I delight in the pitter patter of his feet when we're playing basketball. And we play one-on-one. And of course, I'm not going to use my full force and dunk on the little guy and
Sure.
shots. That's no fun for him. But, we together escape boredom. When those of us who have the greater weight of responsibility live it beyond the pursuit of pleasure. And we find that there's the greatest delight is in living that responsible freedom in relation to the other person who faces you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great answer. It's certainly not the way that most of us, I think, would try to solve our issues on a practical level, try to solve this problem of boredom. I think for most of us, again, the answer is just more, right? More of what is immediately accessible to us. And as you were speaking, I was reminded of the popular hip hop artist. I guess I don't know if he's technically, I don't think he technically counts as rap anyway, but a gentleman by the name of Macklemore. Mm-hmm. And I guess about 3 years ago, he released a song called Intentions. And in this song, he's speaking about, he wants to do these good things. And, I intend to, get fit. I intend to eat healthy. I intend to, grow in virtue, right? And develop these good disciplines and to do something meaningful. And I don't, and that experience of just kind of falling short and just instead of, grabbing the cheeseburger instead of getting up and making the salad, to use kind of a colloquial example. But, and then maybe that's one level of it is when something is meaningful, when it engages the whole of our person. Certainly there is a joy that comes from that, the challenge, and there's suffering involved, right? I mean, I was in competitive sport for a number of years, and it's not always fun. It's not always like I'm loving every moment of this. It's like, I wish this practice was over and I just want to go sleep and, or just, stuff my face and go to bed. But, but there's something very rewarding about the experience of it. And I think perhaps what you're hitting on is that, as human beings, are, at least in our Christian tradition, the greatest use of all the different faculties, all the different abilities, powers that we have as created beings, is love. It's to be able to give ourselves to the other, whether that is the person right in front of me or whether that's God, but that's, that seems to be the summit of our capacity. Right. And of course there's various ways we can do that, right? Some of us in our professional lives, we're involved with helping people in a more direct way. But some of us, it's, most of us, it's the day-to-day, the people I live with under my roof, the person I meet on the street who's asking for money. How do I love them? Mm-hmm. And that seems to be kind of what you're hinting at in terms of our way out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. There's a paradox because, the way out of the inertia of the flesh, and the even you could say prison of the self by itself is to forget about yourself. As Elizabeth of the Trinity, the late 18th century Carmelite nun said, how do you overcome pride? You let it starve to death. How do you overcome selfishness? You let it starve to death. It's a paradox. I mean, Jesus says, if you want to save your life, you must lose it. If you try to save your life, you're going to lose it. It's a paradox. But the self is here not for the self. It's to become that gift to the, as you said, to become the gift to the other person. And there's something authentic about it. Maybe at first you have to overcome the inertia of the flesh by being like, as you say, with Macklemore, I know the right thing to do, and I'm actually going to do it. And I would say as a follower of Jesus, by the grace of God, is also empowering me to overcome my, the big word is concupiscence, my various lusts of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, all these things that I struggle with every day. And yet I'm pushed. And if we think of the self like a sail, again, like a sail, the sailboat doesn't push itself. It relies on the wind. But what the sail has to do is be lifted and opened. And once you do that, you let a wind come that is from an elsewhere than the self. And it's that power, that inspiration from the elsewhere other than the self that allows us to live in love and responsibility toward the other person who faces me.
Right. And of course, that's our path to joy, right? And that's what all of us want is not just to be, happy because we've stumbled on TikTok and we're watching a funny video. I mean, if people, there's always, some little clip to watch and there's nothing wrong with that. But we want a joy that's lasting, right? And I think that the hard truth that we have to face is that the only path towards that is through love and responsibility. To use the words of the former Pope John Paul II, John Paul the Great. I think something too that, as you're speaking is occurring to me is that this idea of givenness to the other, or we encounter them in their givenness and we respond with the gift of ourselves. It really does kind of go back again to this fundamental childlike stance, this childlike disposition of awe. And I think perhaps that's one of our biggest issue in our culture is that we often lack the clarity of vision to see the other as they truly are, to see this person in front of me as the wonder that they are. So in our Christian tradition, obviously we would speak about the person being made in the image of God, and being destined for eternal glory, being redeemed by the blood of Christ, all those great things. But even in a more secular framework, I think that any honest person has to admit that as grand as different organisms are, and mountains, and the motions of the seas, as grand as all those things are, that there is a real treasure in the person who's sitting right beside them. And there's something about that person that is unique and irrepeatable and has depth, even if that person maybe annoys me, or isn't the most fun to hang around, or even if they're elderly and they're not, they're ill or they're mentally ill and they can't communicate with me well, whatever it may be. There's still something miraculous and wonderful about that other person. How do you think we get to that place of being able to see the other person as someone worthy of the gift of who we are?
Yeah, honestly, I think for this transformation to take place in a human being, it's beyond sheer willpower. I think the strength of the self is at once the surrender of the self again to this elsewhere, and that's kind of code language philosophically for God. And not just the abstract idea of God or a higher power somewhere out there, but I would say, in witness to the fullness of God's gift of God's self to us creatures, and this is revealed in Jesus of Nazareth, and his life, his Eucharistic life, where he takes bread and says, "This is my body." Given up for you. This is my blood shed for you. He not only says it and makes food and drink himself to receive in greatest intimacy, which is such a great intimacy we long for as human beings, this intimate encounter with our God, our Maker, our Savior. And he offers his life on the cross, only to be risen from the dead. And the mystery of Jesus' suffering, death, and resurrection, what's called the Paschal mystery in theology, his Passover, his self-donating sacrifice, in and through his body, is the key to awaken that same way of life in his disciples, in his followers. So I would say for me, I depend completely on the liturgical gift to empower me to live like him. The Eucharist itself, to receive the sacraments, baptism first of all, go to the sacrament of penance and confess my sins, and receive the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. Because they're met with the pattern, and not only met with the pattern, which itself is transformative, this pattern of a life of self-giving and self-emptying, self-donating love, but also the very power comes into me in my most interior place of my being, my soul. Teresa of Avila calls the interior castle of the person. And like a sail, I then am propelled to live this way. There's been something that's of a metamorphosis has taken place
Sure.
within me, and I don't point to myself as the source.
Right.
That's the whole point, is that I want to avail myself completely to the source,
Mm-hmm.
to the cause, to the perfect actuality working in me, the same cause that gave me being in the first place.
Right.
That cause wasn't me. We're received being. And so we
Mm-hmm.
depend on that same cause that is God, and the fullness of God's love being poured in and through us,
Mm-hmm.
to live like God lives from beyond eternity and to live with him into eternity. And it's something very real that I would point more to the saints, all these witnesses who lived this life of heroic virtue. It's in all the testimonies, it's in their martyrdoms, and all this evidence that human beings can live this way. And I look at
Mm-hmm.
here's the life of a John Paul II, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Edith,
Mm-hmm.
Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Lisieux, Francis of Assisi, and the list goes on and on and on.
Right.
And so we have this as a pattern, as a possibility for us, and then we have I'm bored in the house. I'm in the house bored.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
what do I feel most moved to, called to? What do I want
Mm-hmm.
to do with my life? I
Yeah.
want to be like them.
Right. Heroic virtue and heroically living for others. And um, yes, I think throughout a lot of different terms that maybe people might not be familiar with, I think to put this perhaps in um, less dogmatic language, I think we could probably summarize what you're saying with that. As Christians, we believe God is love and that he shares that love with us. And until we have encountered the love that satisfies, the love that knows us and gives itself to us and strengthens us to go out, then we cannot be transformed to live a life that's not boring,
Right,
to
right.
live a life that is truly for others, that is filled with that love and that responsibility, that generous responsibility, which is what we all long for. And so, I think thank you for bringing that to our attention. Just keeping an eye on the time here. I know that we're getting into the last few minutes and of our conversation, but pardon me. I do just, as we're having this conversation, I was just thinking about, this kind of ties maybe back into where we started. But there was a woman by the name of Faustina. Of course, Catholics may know her as Saint Faustina. And I remember she was sharing this experience of, her day-to-day life in the place she lived in, the convent, and just saying how the monotony of it all was getting to her, and, kind of complaining, sharing this with God, however you want to see it. And I think it's very relatable, and just kind of saying, it's the same thing day in, day out, this, then this, then this, and then this, and then I get up and do it all over again. And, that sense of like the frustration, what's the point? Why am I doing all this? And I remember that her conclusion of all of this, and I think this is what God was saying to her, was that love makes all things new.
Mm.
And for her, that became the key of changing her perception on everything, was this love, as a response to this deep gratitude in her heart, receiving Christ's love and responding gratefully with love. And I think that's something, and maybe you'll have some thought, something to share about this, but I think that's something that all of us can learn, is that the more we seek to fill our lives with things that are interesting, the more often we seem to fall short of that. And we end up becoming more dissatisfied. And eventually we reach a point where either our day-to-day is so exhausting that we can't be bored because we're exhausted all the time. Or for most of us, where our lives are a little more stable and manageable, the day-to-day, the grind, we spend a lot of our time looking forward and not looking to what is present now, not enjoying the experience and the time that we have now because we're so discontent with where we are. But I guess from everything we've been saying, perhaps the key to all of that is that love and responsibility, that I'm not just living for myself, that I'm not just trying to check all the boxes to make myself feel better or to have this, deep inner sense of I've accomplished something. I mean, those aren't bad, but to live more radically for those around me and ultimately for God, and to say all I do is for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautifully put. I like how you quote Faustina Kowalska, love makes all things new. That's really, really beautiful. And to quote another mystic, a woman named Carol Houselander, a British 20th century mystic, she wrote this beautiful book. I'm reading through like the 5th time right now, called The Passion of the Infant Christ. So anyone could look it up online, and it's a powerful book. It's very simple, easy to read, but very potent, and just her. Ooh. Carol Houselander, she says also, to go along with Faustina, that love makes all things new. And Carol Houselander says, natural love without supernatural love leads to disaster. And so this is an important thing too, because when we use the word love, sometimes we think we have the power to love someone else without, in a sense, or apart from God in some way. And we may be even tempted to think that's more authentic love, like I'm loving this other person for their own sake, with no reference to divinity, and it's this heroic, almost Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzschean love, that I'm gonna do this as a Ubermensch on my own, against the gods, kind of thing. But it always ends in Romeo Juliet, tragic fate,
Right.
uh, because it's trying to hang this weight on a hook that can't bear the weight. It's just the love, the desire. It comes from eternity. It yearns to go to eternity, and that eternity is divinity. Is God, the eternal love of God. So natural love without supernatural love um, is inevitably tragic and has to disaster, is disoriented. And even when I love my wife, Megan, I would say, yes, I love her for her own sake. I love her for her own sake, and I want to be my best for her, at her service. That's what this ring means. May 27th, 2000, when we were married. And the oath, the consummation of our oath, and this life together. But I feel I owe it to her to look to God, to have the fullness of love. If I said I can love you best by myself with no reference to God, I would fail her. I wouldn't invite the master into the
Right.
picture to lead us, to fill us, we who are but sails on the sea of existence. And so we have to look to the wind. We have to raise our sails together and open them wide, that this wind might fill it. So I feel like in my relation to any other human being, I serve them best always in relation to God, and into pointing to God, and let Him being at work among us, rather than pretending like I can accomplish all things by myself, who am really being dishonest at that point, because I'm not the one to receive credit for our lives, my own life, and all this. And so I have to look with great perseverance to the source once again. And this is always exciting. And here's a great paradox too. A lot of people might say praying is boring. And I would wager that praying is one of the most spectacular activities we can participate in. And it's something far beyond boredom. And again, it's a great paradox because sitting quiet, maybe by yourself or community, or someone say going to church is boring, or,
Right.
reading scripture is boring. It's like, wow, no way. It's very thrilling adventure, pure adventure. And one more thing I would add just really quick is just say, I was talking about enjoyment before and going beyond enjoyment to responsibility, but at the same time, as human beings, we do need enjoyment. So I'm not downplaying enjoyment, even as a secular discalced Carmelite, all about detachment and all these things. Yes, indeed. But at the same time, we have to take time to enjoy the good things of life in a virtuous and temperate way. So enjoyment also is good, but always in proportion to the greater vocation of life, like enjoyment, even for the sake of being even more faithfully responsible. So something I've done in my life lately, I've started to drink herbal teas. Caffeine-free teas. I'm talking chamomile. I'm talking lately mango, ginger, peach, raspberry, hibiscus. And I have a cup in the morning, and I put honey in it too, and a cup in the evening. And this is something I enjoy, and because it brings us back to the land. I think part of our struggle with boredom, we've drifted from the land. We've drifted from the adventure of living close to the land, with the animals and the crops, the livestock, heating with wood. All these things that really humanize us, because we're not so much these automatons in an abstract world of being as we are enmeshed in a symbiotic ecosystem of life. That's who we are as human beings. And so, to get out in nature and to get exercise and enjoy the beauty, I think this is all very important, not to let ourselves be bored. But again, it takes that step into suffering and into discomfort a little bit. Maybe it's more comfortable to sit around the couch and watch Netflix.
Yeah.
Take a walk in the cold. But I guarantee you, take a walk in the cold, just wear good, proper clothing. You will enjoy the fresh air, what you see in nature, and so these two.
Yes. Thank you for that. It just reminds me very briefly. I had, for the most people that probably know me, I spent a year up north, northern Manitoba and Saskatchewan, which is quite a ways. I think about 1,500 miles north of Detroit, was in that area. And some of these communities I was in, there was very little in terms of modern amenities. So sometimes we had Wi-Fi, sometimes we didn't. But there was no mall, there was no clothing store, there was no movie theater or bowling alley, anything like that. It was like, there's the school, there's the church, there's the bush. And there's something about that at first that was very jarring. And of course, the more time you spend in it, I mean, there were days you get a little stir crazy, but overall, that experience of being so stripped of things, I know that when I returned, there was this newfound appreciation, right? And sometimes I think that's an issue too, is that we get so saturated with things that are good that, it's like if you eat, a piece of chocolate, the first one tastes fantastic, but by piece 25, you're about to throw up, it's just not good anymore, right? It has lost its flavor. And I think sometimes we live our lives like that. So I think we're going to kind of wrap up here. I do want to just invite anyone who is watching this, listening to this. Thank you again for taking the time to check this out. And if you have any comments or questions about anything that has been said, the comment section, unfortunately, I mean, it'll be closed now. We won't be able to see it live, but you can always leave a comment on the video. You can also reach out at the email address, you, as in the letter, projectoutreach@gmail.com. Again, that's you, as in the letter, projectoutreach@gmail.com. That's all one word. And you can send an email with your thoughts. Maybe you disagree with something that was said. That's fantastic. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you have any questions or you want clarification of something that Dr. Wallenfang was talking about, you can always send that email and I can always forward it to him. So we'll end there. Dr. Wallenfang, thank you so much for taking this time. I enjoyed our conversation. I don't think it was boring.
Not at all.
And I think if we had to summarize everything, it's stop worrying about yourself, love and enjoy, and you won't be bored. You'll rediscover the wonder.
in a nutshell, yeah.
So, okay, well, we'll say good night to everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and we're going to end our broadcast here.
Thanks so much.
Okay, I think it's ending. It's so there were some connection issues.
Okay.
We might still be live. The count. Oh no. If anyone's watching, they can have a little chuckle over my technical difficulties.
Yeah. They're kind of inevitable.
Oh no. And of course, I don't want to just leave the page, because if I do that, then you may have, if I end the broadcast or if I just close the window, I don't think it's going to post properly, which would be really unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, oh my, it's still giving me issues. Well, I'll take you out, Dr. Wallenfang, and I'll let you head out. Thanks again for taking part in this. And
sure, Avery.
Yeah, I'll see you, I guess, next week for class. So
definitely. Oh,
all right.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much. This was fun. And talking more about this topic, and and hopefully hear some other people's thoughts out there that raise questions for wanted to chime in themselves.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you have a great night.
All right. See ya, Avery.
If you are watching this, I just want to apologize. There are some technical difficulties for whatever reason that are preventing me from ending this broadcast. So here's what it is. I just hope the length of the video doesn't discourage. I doubt anyone's watching at this point.